For communities to thrive, there has to be a willingness to experiment with ideas, experiment with strategies to solve issues. And Sarasota is a very unique place in that it fosters that type of experimentation. You see it in both the business climate, but you also see it in the nonprofit world too, both with what the foundations are willing to co-invest in and help catalyze to solving issues, but also in terms of the foundation, the nonprofit leaders that are trying to solve some of the issues our community faces. But that willingness to experiment, that willingness to be misunderstood for periods of time are what makes great communities, because through that experimentation, you really build these incredibly intricate bonds of trust, of viability and sustainability that ultimately shape great communities. And that's something that this community here has in spades. I would say that I didn't choose Sarasota, rather Sarasota chose me. I spent the younger part of my life growing up in England. I was born and raised in a small town called Preston in the northwest of England. And after I finished my A-levels, I took a gap year and ended up in Detroit. And I dropped out of college and started building a company in Detroit. One morning on the way to work, I dozed off of the wheel. And when I woke up, when I came to, I had 18 fractures in my face. I couldn't see and I couldn't speak. And my parents happened to live down in Bradenton. So I came down here really not by choice, but really as a path to recover. And in that way, Sarasota chose me. You know, I used to visit Sarasota when I was younger and never really thought there was anything appealing about it. It was beaches, old people, and at the time, a little bit of traffic. And there was really nothing about it that really grabbed my imagination. And it wasn't until I got stuck here and scratched below the surface of what you see as a visitor or a tourist that I realized that there was just a world of opportunity waiting to be uncovered here. I think when you look at Sarasota's business climate, it's largely built on small business. Small business is the backbone of what Sarasota represents. We do have some mid-sized to large employers, but the real innovation, the real job creation of Sarasota has been in the small business category. And so what you see is a broad diversity of different businesses that target specific industries. And what's amazing is, and one of the things that I learned in moving here, is that a lot of these companies fly under the radar. They simply exist here, but the business that they do is global, international, even national. And what they have created here is a place that they call home and a place that they can operate successfully out of and clearly can recruit the talent that they need in order to sustain the enterprise that they're in. Sarasota has always had this challenge of a brain drain. If you look back in time, I've been here 20 years, and 20 years ago, we faced the same challenge. How do we keep the graduating youth of today here for tomorrow? And part of that has been the jobs, the availability of creative, well-paying jobs that afford a lifestyle here. And so that's kind of changed now because of COVID. So now we have jobs that are geographically unbound, that you don't necessarily have to be in Sarasota to work at a company. So the jobs are there. I think the quality of life is the other thing that we have in spades. And another key factor is affordable housing. You know, how do you create the makeup of housing that young people can afford, and more importantly, acquire to start a family and ultimately put down roots here? And I think the other part of that is that there is a real need to create community and connectivity to that community that retains that youth, and ensuring that they feel that their ideas, their visions, their involvement in society is kind of recognized and embraced by the town as a whole. I believe affordable housing is both a policy issue and a private developer issue, in the sense that we need better guidelines by policymakers to incentivize and create opportunities for private developers to essentially construct affordable units. In some ways, that's density. In other ways, it's the assignment of parking. Parking is a barrier towards building affordable housing, from my point of view, because of our laws that stipulate currently that you need a set number of parking spaces per unit. And in order to create density, particularly in an urban environment, don't necessarily need a car. A lot of people can live in an urban core without a car. And somehow we have yet to catch up to that here in Sarasota. And I think that's one of the barriers that exists from my point of view. I think the other part of it is really getting developers to understand that the composition and the makeup of the housing units they develop integrate a component of affordability. And where we're sitting today in the Rosemary District, I mean, we have the entire breadth and spread of affordable housing, 2 multi-million-dollar units. So it's kind of an interesting ecosystem that gets created when you mix different economic values as it relates to housing. You create a lot more diversity and ultimately a lot more vibrancy in terms of the community that's cultivated around it. Large companies are typically driven by employees and the accessibility to talent. And I would argue that there's been a mind shift with respect to where we source talent. There was a time when companies would geographically locate around centers of talent. Silicon Valley is a great example of that. Today, I don't think employers look at it the same way, and they're more open to the idea of distributed talent and the ability to allow people to work from everywhere. So attracting a big company might mean something very different today than it did 5 years or 10 years ago. And so I do think that there are opportunities for large companies to locate here, whether it's their executive teams, whether it's the leadership of a company. But ultimately, the question is, are we producing the type of talent in Sarasota that a large employer is looking for? And that's really a question for the community. Sarasota has always been a tale of two cities. You have the waterfront neighborhoods and you have the affluency of kind of the shoreline inland. And then you have whatever else is happening out east in the county. And we've seen growth out east in the form of Lakewood Ranch, et cetera. But I think what's happened over time is that as land values have appreciated, the type of housing that's constructed on them has also become more expensive. And what it's done is it's created a displacement factor where people, in order to find a place to live, have had to go north or south in order to find something that fits a price point or a range that they're looking for. And so there's really not been great incentives provided to develop more affordable units. And secondly, the price points of most units, all of the metrics are really designed to reward large, expansive units that often sell for millions of dollars, regardless of their location in the downtown core. And so what we really need to do is try to figure out how to build smaller, more efficient units that allow younger people the ability to afford and essentially create a home, a lifelong home, and ultimately participate in the equity growth that comes from owning real estate. When I moved here in 2004, a gentleman gave me a great piece of advice. He told me that you probably won't be successful here because you're not white. And he was actually a Hispanic gentleman, and his tactic towards making a success for himself had been to partner with an older white gentleman in order to penetrate into what he called the old boys club at the time. So that was kind of my first introduction towards what inclusivity meant in this community. And as an Indian in a largely Caucasian community, I would say that I've had a first-hand view towards diversity and inclusion in this community. And from my perspective, it has been an incredibly inclusive community. Many of the things that I've wanted to try and do have been embraced and supported by the community. However, I can see it through the lens of others who exist here, others who have tried and maybe left, in the sense that they maybe haven't felt as supported or haven't felt as nurtured in terms of what they were trying to accomplish. And I think that's a combination of tenacity but on their part, but also the community's openness towards supporting others and newcomers. There's always been a thread of inclusion in the history of Sarasota, and it's presented itself in different ways. Today, for example, in the Rosemary District, you have everything from homeless people to million-dollar condos. The socioeconomic spread there is probably the most diverse in the entire city. And I think that we need to cultivate more of that, more Section 8 housing paired with million-dollar condos because of what it creates in the sense of community and how it creates a fabric in the community that everyone feels inclusive of and feels like they have a similar standing and a voice that they can share in it. And I think the Rosemary District is really exemplary in terms of how it's developed to represent what I believe future of great communities should look like. And that's one of the reasons why me personally, why we're so invested in the Rosemary District. Sarasota has an incredible base of philanthropy. Its giving is off the charts, in my opinion. What these foundations are incredible at doing is identifying the root of an issue that affects our community. But where their real power comes into play is their ability to identify where to put the fulcrum of effort to address or solve an issue that our community is facing, and do it in a way that delivers a meaningful result. And so you've got examples of that throughout this community for decades that have been going on, where this community, the foundations, have largely taken a front row seat towards solving issues that we're facing and bringing together partners, donors, and more importantly, the subject matter experts that can help solve and transform this community for the better. And that is an incredible asset to Sarasota that very few communities have in the capacity that we have it. Sarasota is a tale of two cities, and our census only tells half the story. I do believe Sarasota is segregated right now, and as a community, we have a civic responsibility to find opportunities to force or create, cultivate more interaction between different ethnic groups, between different socioeconomic groups, and different cultures, because there's such a large migrant population that is not counted. They're not represented in the census data. And so all you have to do is drive out east, and you have to visit communities south of us, and you'll start to see just the broad sense of diversity that is often misrepresented in just the numbers. And I think when you look at the statistics and you look at the data and you look at the population counts versus what you actually see in the classrooms today, there's a big disparity there. And we need to find ways to better integrate and allow other ethnicities, newcomers to the region, ways to feel inclusive and ways to feel like they can participate. And sometimes that gets lost in this community. Community to me is about a group of individuals who care about a common purpose, share a common purpose, and are aligned in their objectives towards advancing that purpose or cause. For me personally, it's represented by this simple philosophy of wherever you are, whatever you do, you have a duty to serve your community. And over the years, that community has represented everything from students to fellow entrepreneurs to the backyard where we live, work, and play in. Communities thrive because of the people and ultimately the personalities that help shape them. You know, it's that disparate interest, that opposing viewpoints. It's the divergent thinking that comes out of being willing to look at things through different lenses. And the only way that you're ever going to be able to look at issues through different lenses is by taking on the aperture of other people who look at them differently. And so great communities are driven by differing personalities that may have very opposing viewpoints, but understand that by coming together on a singular objective or a singular purpose around a singular purpose, that together we can do a better job of solving this problem or issue, whatever it might be. My personal philosophy towards racism has been really to try and rise above it, to do better, to hopefully set a better example for people who may have grown up looking at me through a prejudiced lens, to think differently about what I represent, what I stand for, and ultimately what I'm capable of. And that's really it. It's that simple. And what I hope is that next generation, my kids, grow up in a different world than perhaps the one I came through with respect to racism in their upbringing. At times, Sarasota can feel like a bit of a bubble in the sense that it's very easy to surround yourself with people who look at, think about, and view the world through the same lens as you. And the only way that we're going to break through is by bringing ideas from the outside, bringing perspectives in that help us look at the world differently. And that's something I'm personally very committed to. Sarasota has always rewarded pioneers and innovators, and we have so many great things that are coming out of this decade, let's call it, of growth in Sarasota. Everything from new aquarium, new botanical gardens, multiple new parks. The Bay was the first park that's been opened by the Parks and Recs department since its formation, for example. We have just a plethora of new opportunities for community to engage, and really sets a whole new foundation for a new generation to build upon and be inspired by. One of the projects that I've been particularly inspired by in this community is the Bay. It's a 53-acre park that aimed to transform the Sarasota Bayfront from a parking lot into a green and blue oasis. And why it's so significant to Sarasota is simply this: parks are open, accessible, free and welcoming to all. And if you look at the way that that project came about, it really showed how a community can align around a common objective and use that common objective to transform a piece of land, turning it into one of the greatest assets of our community and something that will live for generations, centuries to come. And that to me has been one of the most inspiring things that I've personally had a privilege of playing a role in. When you think about the responsibility that we owe the next generation, it's not only about creating spaces that they can grow in and thrive that are open and accessible for all, but there's also the environmental side of it as well. And what the Bay has done from an environmental standpoint is really a very important set of decisions for the future of our community. We're taking every drop of water that lands on that 53-acre largely parking lot of a site and treating it and returning back to the Bay treated water that essentially allows environment to thrive. And so some of the decisions that were made around how to convert and reclaim what is largely asphalt and transform it into an inspirational park have really revolved around the environment too. And the environment is a critical set of decision-making criteria that I hope our community continues to take seriously as we look to the future. As a community, we have a responsibility to ensure the decisions that we're making today positively impact the generation tomorrow. And I really believe that's the role of today's community here in Sarasota. And so as it relates to housing, many of the decisions today are going to be inherited by our kids tomorrow. And I think about that a lot as a father. I think about what's the future of this community and what's the likelihood that this is a community that tomorrow's generation can thrive and do the things that they aspire to do right here in Sarasota. And part of that is really making sure and really thinking long term about the impact of the decisions that we're making today. 20 years from now, I hope that Sarasota is still above water, above sea level, and continues to be a place where people can thrive and prosper. Sean, I'll be truthfully candid with you. I really don't know how to answer that question, because you just have to look at our coastline and you have to look at what we're doing from an environmental factor. That Florida is in a whole heap of trouble, and I just don't think people realize how quickly it's coming. Look, I spend time in Antarctica. I've been to Antarctica 3 times. I've taken kids from all over the world to show them the face of climate change, to show them how their decisions that they make every day affect the macro scale of environment, polar cap melt, et cetera. And I think just the transformation I've seen in Antarctica over the past 5 years is truly astounding, and that's going to catch up to us really fast. And as a coastline city in Florida, we're the front line of it. We will swim first. My highest hope for Sarasota is that the decisions we make today positively impact generations tomorrow. They don't inherit our time here. We're borrowing from their time. And so every decision we make as a community, as a society, sets the foundation for what they are going to inherit. And it's incredibly important that we get that right. I was 24 years old, and I'd lost every sense of my own personal identity. I looked different. I couldn't see properly. I had lost my voice in this accident. And to move here and to be embraced by a community that was entirely foreign to me was really something that resonated with me. And in large part, I owe my success here to a lot of the community and the people that helped create it. from my point of view, I build on the shoulders of others. There are so many people who have been here before me who continue to shape and drive this community in new directions. I've always believed that wherever you are, whatever you do, you have a duty to serve your community. And it's through that lens, I ask myself all the time, is what we're about to do going to leave this community in a better place than when we entered it? And so I'd ask the same of you. Is what you're about to do, are the fingerprints that you're going to leave behind, going to make Sarasota a better place than the way you entered it?